The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing our review of the player cards in the revised core set for the benefit of new players. We are going to take a look at the Mystic cards. This is part 1 of a 3-part series. The first 2 parts will take a look at the level 0 cards, while part 3 will take a look at the upgrades. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular investigator get a Blessed token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. We are back with our review of the revised core set for the benefit of new players. This time around, we are taking a look at the Mystic cards. This will be divided into 3 parts. The first 2 videos will take a look at the level 0 cards, and the final video will take a look at the upgrades. We are starting things off with Forbidden Knowledge. It is a free asset with an intellect skill icon in the talent trait. Enters play with 4 secrets. If Forbidden Knowledge has no secrets, discard it. As a free triggered ability, exhaust Forbidden Knowledge and take 1 horror. Move 1 secret from Forbidden Knowledge to your resource pool as a resource. We talked a little bit about how Old Book of Lore is sort of Daisy Walker's other signature card, and I think you can make the same argument for Forbidden Knowledge being Agnes's other signature card.
Yep.
Yeah.
Match made in heaven right there.
Yeah, not only does it let you trigger Agnes's ability pretty much on command, but it also generates resources for you so that you can continue playing spells or playing other assets that you need. Great card in Agnes.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much in other Mystics, because if you compare it to the neutral staple emergency cache, Forbidden Knowledge is only going to give you 1 additional resource over emergency cache, but it's also going to cost you 4 horror, and you get those resources in a drip rather than all at once. So I think this card Forbidden Knowledge is pretty specialized to, well, Agnes.
Yeah, and another investigator that we can talk about in a bit. But yeah, like you said, it is fairly niche, and there are certainly not a lot of other investigators that are going to want to take Forbidden Knowledge over something like Emergency Cache.
I mean, there might be some corner cases where you really want to be able to move the secrets around, but that's like after you've really expanded your card pool. Or maybe if you want to use Forbidden Knowledge to tactically defeat your own allies because they have Doom on them, like David Renfeld or Arcane Initiate. But other than that, like this is basically an Agnes card.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think I've ever played this card outside of Agnes. Daisy can certainly play this card. She has the sanity to absorb all the horror, but I don't think taking upwards of 4 horror for 4 resources is really a trade that many investigators are going to be willing to make. Obviously, this card is fantastic in Agnes because it does trigger her ability, and I wish there were other investigators that had some sort of benefit for doing so, but I think this card's value, it's already a very specialized card in the revised core set, and then once you expand your card pool, Mystics get cards like Uncage the Soul in the Path to Carcosa and Voice of Ra in the Jacqueline Fine starter deck. So they have a lot easier ways of generating resources without taking a whole bunch of horror to do so. So this card becomes even more specialized as you expand your card pool. How would you rate this one?
As somebody that plays a decent amount of Carolyn, this card actually comes in pretty clutch for me. But, like we've been saying, this card is very niche, so I would give it a Blessed token simply for that fact. It's really quite good in Agnes and in Carolyn, because Carolyn gains resources when she heals horror. This deals her horror, so she can put it on Peter Sylvester and gain 2 resources. It's a huge engine for her.
Yeah, it's pretty much the definition of a Blessed token, to be honest. If you have a way of turning horror into a good thing, play this card. If you don't play this card. One thing I would like to mention, though, a fun trick you can do with this card is Triggering it is a lightning bolt action, meaning there are lots of phases in the game where you can use this forbidden knowledge, and Agnes's ability is once per phase. So you could do some fun tricks like trigger forbidden knowledge during the enemy phase after hunters have moved but before they attack. So for example, Agnes can defeat a swarm of rats after it's hunted her but before it gets to bite her. Fun tricks like that exist for this card with Agnes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is the definition of a bless token. It goes very well in a couple of investigators, and pretty much every other investigator under the sun who isn't named Agnes or Carolyn is not going to bother with this. They simply have easier ways to generate resources, and I think it's important that you do mention, because of that free triggered ability, you can trigger this in pretty much any phase of the game, from Mythos, Investigation, Enemy, and even the Upkeep if you needed to. So you can use this in combination with Agnes's response to ping enemies for a damage pretty much at will, which is pretty nice. You just need a way to deal with that horror that you're going to build up pretty rapidly if you're using this consistently. The next card in the box is Holy Rosary. It's a 2-cost asset with a willpower, skill icon, item, and charm trait. You get +1 willpower, and it has 2 sanity and takes up an accessory slot. Pretty much a standard issue in most Mystics for quite a while, even as your card pool grows. If you're going in sequence, you don't receive many cards that will replace Holy Rosary for quite some time.
No, especially not at that low price of 2 resources. Mystics kind of have a similar struggle with resources like Guardians do, where they need a lot of resources to be able to play their key assets. And similar to Guardians, they also have to keep playing assets because their spells will run out of charges at some point. Holy Rosary allows Agnes to essentially trivialize a lot of the encounter deck, boosting her up to 6 willpower and giving her that 2 extra sanity. If she happens to draw an auto fail on a Rotting Remains or something, she can tank the damage on this, and she can just go about her business. I do think the +1 willpower is a little... It's not as good in Agnes, simply because she already has 5 willpower. So boosting her up to a 6 often is a bit overkill, but there are situations where that actually comes in pretty clutch, especially when you're trying to Shriveling a 4-fight enemy or something like that.
Yeah, if you're making a lot of willpower tests, +1 willpower is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, for the price and the fact that you get Sanity Soak out of this thing is pretty much a staple. Like, you need a good reason to not be playing 2 Holy Rosary in a Mystic deck.
Even an investigator like Daisy, if you are playing a Daisy deck that wants to be throwing spells around, having that +1 willpower is a huge boon for her. So she is a little bit more effective. How would you... I should actually mention that there is a level 2 upgrade for Holy Rosary in the Light of the Fog pack, but it is perhaps the most unusual upgrade in that it switches classes. It actually becomes a Guardian card, which takes it out of most Mystics aren't able to use it until you expand your card pool and you get somebody like Diana Stanley, who is part Mystic and part Guardian. Agnes can't use the upgrade, and neither can Daisy. So it's an odd upgrade in that context. And it's also worth mentioning that probably the only real knock against Holy Rosary is that competition for those accessory slots in the Mystic class in particular can be pretty fierce, especially as you gain some upgrades. There are many upgrades that are targeting that accessory slot. Fortunately, the revised core set does include the card Relic Hunter that was originally released in the Essex County Express that allows you to have extra accessories if you need them. How would you rate this one?
I think in the core set, this is 100% an Elder Sign, and as you expand your card pool, this still ends up being really strong, and I think in the larger card pool, I'd give it a +1. It just gives you so much for so little cost that it's hard to compete with, I think.
Yeah, I agree on the Elder Sign. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like if your deck, if you're investigator, if you can take Holy Rosary, you kind of want you need a good reason to not pack two Holy Rosaries because just Sanity Soak, willpower, cost, very good.
Yeah, I don't think I have built many Mystic decks over the years that haven't automatically included two Holy Rosaries, just to have that willpower boost, because it not only makes you more effective against treacheries, but when you want to use your Shriveling, you're automatically making yourself a little bit more effective in combat without really doing a whole lot. So it really pays off. So this one's an elder sign for me as well. Speaking of Shriveling, that is the next card we are taking a look at. 3-cost asset with a combat skill icon. Spell trait. Enters play with 4 charges. As an action, you may spend a charge fight. This attack uses willpower instead of combat and deals +1 damage. If you draw a Skull Cultist tablet, Elder Thing, or auto-fail symbol is revealed during this attack, you take 1 horror, and this takes up an arcane slot. I can't think of a card that is more iconic for the Mystic class than Shriveling. You will play 2 copies of Shriveling in every Mystic deck you build for quite a while. If you're picking up the game sort of in sequence, there aren't many replacements for Shriveling for quite some time. This one is pretty much an auto elder sign in the revised core and beyond for quite some time.
Yeah, I think even as you expand your card pool, there's basically 2 other options if you want to deal damage with your arcane slot. There's Wither and Azure Flame. And Azure Flame is very similar to Shriveling in that it deals you damage when you draw a special token. And Wither only gives the enemy minus fight and minus evade at its level 0 version, and then the level 4, I believe, adds a subtraction to health as well. But man, what an iconic card for the Mystic class. I mean, like you said, man, from Lang, you're going to be playing this card in every single Mystic or off-class Mystic deck pretty much as long as you play this game.
Yeah, this is like Guardians including a weapon. You know, like you're gonna include a 2 damage spell asset. I mean, yeah, as the card pool expands greatly, you have Azure Flame and Armageddon, and these are just flavors of the same thing, and that thing is Shriveling. So you need a really good reason to not play Shriveling if you're a Mystic, I have to say. Or one of its flavors. Yeah.
And the artwork on it is so good. It's one of my favorite pieces of artwork in the entire game.
Classic, yeah.
Now, I should mention there is a level 3 upgrade for Shriveling in the Essex County Express Mythos pack. I still don't know why they did not add that to the revised core set. But if you do want it, you will have to either pick up the Essex County Express pack or wait until they re-release the Dunwich Legacy Investigator expansion in the new year. And if you wait, you will also get the level 5 upgrade, which is in the Lost in Time and Space Mythos pack, and both of those simply increase the bonus you get from willpower as well as the damage. And as your card pool expands, you can pick up a card like Arcane Research from Threads of Fate that makes upgrading your Shriveling that much cheaper. If you're playing a Mystic and you're looking for cards to upgrade, Shriveling is usually one of your top priorities. Shriveling is certainly works a lot better with Agnes, because if you do draw one of those special tokens and you take a horror, this thing will deal 3 damage instead of 2. I guess the only real knock against it is that horror that you take. Agnes can convert it into damage. Other Mystics aren't so lucky, and it can be touch and go sometimes when you're playing a scenario and you need to take down an enemy and you are running low on sanity and your only option is Shriveling. It can end up killing you from time to time.
Yeah, that is true. There are times where it can put you in that precarious situation of, well, I need to attack it, and I just kind of have to hope I don't draw a token and die from sanity loss. But I think those situations are generally pretty rare. And as you expand your card pool, you get so much sanity soak and so much horror prevention. I don't really find that to be much of an issue in most of my plays of this game, but man, what a good card.
Yeah, the downside there, it mainly means that it just adds more importance to soaks like Holy Rosary or even Arcane Initiate. It means that even if you are starting a Mystic deck and you already have 8 or 9 sanity, still load up on sanity soak because you're gonna have some of it self-inflicted, like from Shriveling. You're gonna having to deal with sanity loss from enemy attacks or the encounter deck as well. So basically, just load up on the soaks, even though you have a lot of sanity already.
Yeah, and if you're playing Agnes, you're going to be inflicting some horror on yourself, so you'll need to make sure that you bring enough soak along. Already, I mean, I've already said this is definitely an Elder Sign, and if you're building a Mystic deck with the revised core set card pool or beyond, you don't need to. 2 copies of Shriveling is pretty much an auto include.
The only thing I wish the revised core set did was just add more copies of Shriveling so that both Agnes and Daisy could take this card.
That would be smart. Just give it to both of them. Makes sense.
The next card in the pack is Scrying. It is a 1-cost asset with an intellect skill icon. Spell trait, uses 3 charges. As an action, you can exhaust Scrying and spend 1 charge. Look at the top 3 cards of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. Return them to the top of that deck in any order. And this takes up an arcane slot. This has my vote for some of the best art in the Arkham Horror LCG. Unfortunately, the card itself is not particularly good.
I don't even remember the last time I included a card like this in my Mystic decks. I think the biggest issue with Scrying is twofold. It's slow and it takes up an arcane slot. And those arcane slots are very precious. You need those for your Shrivelings. And in the revised core set, you have access to Rite of Seeking, which is also going to be quintessential in your Agnes deck. So I just find Scrying to just have so little impact in the game, especially in multiplayer where looking at 3 cards isn't going to do you a whole lot because you're going to draw through 4 or 3 cards anyway. So changing,
you mean?
Yeah, so changing the order of the encounter deck really only has minor benefits to it. Maybe to like have Skids dodge Frozen in Fear or something like that. But yeah, this card's just too slow.
Yeah, it's the action that really, is the knock against it. That being said, I think in true solo play, I think there is a case to be made for using Scrying exclusively to mess around with the order of the encounter deck. Because if let's say you spend an action, you look at 3 cards, that means you know what your encounter draws are going to be for 3 more turns. Then you use Scrying again. There might be something there.
Well, it's like if you use it every turn, right? You're essentially
don't use it every turn. No.
You'd only be seeing 1 new card, and you can only do that 3 times, right?
Yeah. Maybe if you used it. Maybe if you used like every other turn, so that way you kind of stack it and you delay a really nasty encounter draw. Like there might be something there, but only if it's like absolute filler. Like if you don't have anything else to add to your deck. There's a case to be said about using this if you have Daisy and Agnes in the same group, maybe, and you don't have spells to go around.
Yeah,
but it's
It's like within
I
the
have played
confines
this in true solo, and being able to look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck is valuable. Sometimes it's nice to be able to know, okay, here are going to be the next 3 encounter draws. I get to rig them the way I want, so if there's an enemy, I can push it back a little bit or bring it forward if necessary. But for me, it's really as you've mentioned, it's just too slow. Taking that action and spending a charge is very slow, and also the arcane slot. And while there isn't a lot of competition for that arcane slot until you upgrade into Rite of Seeking in the revised core, as soon as your card pool expands, there are so many cards that require arcane slots that this thing just doesn't make the cut. There are just so many other cards that you can play before this that you'll opt for those. Now there is, I believe, Gloria Goldberg, which was the investigator who was released in the Dark Revelations novella, can get a little bit more value out of these types of cards that manipulate the encounter deck, but there aren't any. I can't think of any real investigators besides maybe Norman Withers, who really wants to play around with the whole encounter deck manipulation theme, and I think he's probably got better ways of doing it. So yeah, this one just doesn't make the cut, unfortunately. There is a level 3 upgrade in the revised core set that resolves some of the speed issues that this one has, but man, I wish they had put the level 3 upgrade for Shriveling in instead. That would have been a lot more useful to more players than another copy of Shriveling or another copy of Scrying. Sorry, it's just not a priority.
Yeah, I feel like if you could find a way to reliably shuffle whatever deck you're trying to look at, then Scrying gets a lot more value, because then you can look at 3 cards and go, yeah, I don't like these, shuffle them away, and then the following turn look at another 3 cards, and you could generate more value, kind of similar to how Brainstorm works for any Magic players out there. You generally combo that with shuffle effects to maximize its utility, but Scrying, it's too slow, and it's just too minor of an effect to really get a lot done.
Yeah, especially beyond solo, because you just draw through the encounter deck so quickly. I noticed how about 100% of our discussion was on looking at the encounter deck and not your own deck. Yeah, it may be tempting as a new player to try to bury your weakness or know when it's coming, but just don't. Just take it on the chin,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever triggered this on my own deck. It's always, if I'm playing Scrying, it's to manipulate the encounter deck to give myself a little more time against an enemy that I don't plan on dealing with right away. Like, especially if you're playing a Mystic, I can see why they included this, because if you're playing a Mystic, a lot of the time you're really either waiting for the card that's going to help you investigate or the card that's going to help you kill enemies, in this case Shriveling. So if you happen to draw this but not your Shriveling, you can sort of manipulate the encounter deck a little bit to sort of push the enemy down the line until you can draw your Shriveling. I don't think I've ever used this to look at my own deck, though, and reorder it. I guess you could try to find your Shriveling, but I don't know.
There's a better card just in a couple of minutes that's going to do that,
So how would you rate poor Scrying?
I'm torn between a Tentacle and an Elder Thing. I think I gotta give it a Tentacle. This card just is too slow. It just doesn't do enough.
It's a Tentacle. Unless, now I do admit, I think there's some really big brain things you could do with this, but like in the context of the core, this is your pool, and like 99% of the time, it's a Tentacle. Just don't even bother.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I've got to agree with you. As much as I believe I have played this card and it has helped a little bit, the times that it has helped me have just been too narrow, and I don't think I've ever included this. Beyond playing with Agnes out of the revised core, I don't think I've ever put this in a deck unless you pick up the Dark Revelations novella for Gloria Goldberg. This is probably going to stay in your box until she is officially released in the card pool at some point down the line. Until then, yeah, competition for those arcane slots is just so fierce that you'll have way better options going forward. The next card we're looking at is Arcane Studies. It's a 2-cost asset with a willpower and intellect skill icon talent trait. As a free triggered ability, you can spend 1 resource, you get +1 willpower for this skill test, or you can spend 1 resource to get +1 intellect for this skill test. Another talent that can boost Agnes's willpower or intellect if necessary. I guess the big question is whether Mystics have the resources in order to pay for this thing.
Yeah, I've actually found myself using this more in off-class Mystics, because they tend to actually have resources, and the fact that this boosts willpower and intellect, which are probably 2 of the most common stats you want to be boosting most of the time anyway, it comes in comes in handy quite a lot, actually. I find myself particularly using this a lot in my Ashcan Pete decks because you have 5 slots, and this is a pretty decent one of, and he's got a lot of resources that he can play around with, so it's not bad, especially if you combo it with Scrapper, then that has all your bases covered, which can be nice. I like Arcane
Ashcan
Studies.
Pete. Oh, he's a good one. Yeah, I think. So I actually think, like, within the context of the revised core, I think of the 5 talents, this one's actually the least good. Mainly because Mystics, you want to try to be investigating with your willpower anyway, and to do that, you want to be playing like Holy Rosary and getting your willpower as high as possible. So then you don't need the intellect boost at all, because you're gonna want to be using Rite of Seeking or Sixth Sense from the Circle Undone to do investigations, and then your willpower is just gonna get so high that paying for it is costly compared to other ways of raising your willpower. Of the 5 talents, this is probably my least favorite. That being said, there are some, especially outside of the revised core set, there are some investigators that I think can make this work. Jenny Barnes is another one who I think can use this one pretty well.
I do think this could actually be pretty good in Daisy.
Yeah, Daisy's a tough one because on the one hand, she could play this, but on the other, she could also play Hyper Awareness to deal with enemies.
Yeah.
By putting money into evasion.
True, but if you decide
Yeah.
to go, like, maybe you want to play 2 copies of Shriveling, like you're playing with Norman, or you're playing with Roland or something like that, and maybe
Yeah.
you go kind of more into the Mystic card pool, I could see Arcane Studies being decent in Daisy, but
Okay.
yeah, I do agree with you that,
Yeah.
I think just within the context of the core set, Arcane Studies is not the best, simply because, like you said, you kind of generally want to be putting all your eggs into that willpower basket, so that intellect boost doesn't really come in handy that often. And like you said, Agnes has 5 willpower already, so like you're
Yeah.
often up to a 6 with Holy Rosary, and then if you're upgrading something else, maybe you're up to a 7. So yeah, it's just really not that necessary.
Plus, Agnes can take Dig Deep for more agility Agnes. Telling you guys, agility Agnes. Yeah, because Dig Deep can help her evade things. And Agnes has 2 intellect, and she does not need the intellect from Arcane Studies at all. So I think she would probably want Dig Deep over this.
Yeah, I think in the revised core set, I think you could make a case for this either in Daisy or Agnes. I wouldn't play more than 1 copy, but depending on the type of group that you're playing in, if you're playing Daisy as a more offensive-minded investigator with the 2 copies of Shriveling, having the ability to dump some of those resources that you're generating with Dr. Myling Christopher into a willpower skill test doesn't hurt. And if you happen to be playing Agnes in the revised core, until she gains some experience points and can afford to buy Rite of Seeking, doesn't have a lot of investigation options, and so having that +1 intellect can help her grab a clue here and there if she needs to. I think once she gains some experience points and you get Rite of Seeking, the value of this drops pretty rapidly. The same is true if you expand your card pool and pick up cards like any of the other copies of Rite of Seeking that are available in the Dunwich Legacy or Sixth Sense from the Circle Undone cycle. You don't really need the intellect bonus from this thing. Isn't going to be all that useful. But I think in the revised core, depending on what type of group you're playing with, this might have some use. I guess the biggest problem with Agnes is that just generating the resources to pay for this. But you are going to be playing Forbidden Knowledge, so you are going to get some resources there. So between a copy of Shriveling and this, you might be able to chip in with a couple of intellect skill tests at low shroud locations where she could grab a clue and help out a little bit. How would you rate this card?
Maybe this is a bit of my personal experience kind of weighing into my judgment a little bit, but I've always kind of liked Arcane Studies for what it is. So I'd give it a 0.
I'm not as big a fan on the talents in general, because usually I think they take up the slot that I love jamming like guts into. I'd say that in my opinion, this is like the least good of the 5, so I'd give this one an Elder Thing. It's pretty narrow, I'd say.
I think I'm going to give this one a 0 simply because I think it has a place in the revised core. Once you expand your card pool, though, I don't think there are many times you're going to be reaching for this, largely because one of the primary ways that Mystic decks are built outside the revised core is just stacking willpower as high as possible. And so you don't need the willpower from this. And then Mystics gain far better ways of discovering clues outside of the revised core. So you don't really need the intellect either. So the value of this plummets pretty rapidly once your card pool expands. There is a level 2 upgrade that's in the Return to the Night of the Zealot product that makes this free, and the level 4 upgrade, which enters play with 2 resources that replenish themselves, that's in the Jacqueline Fine starter deck. But yeah, if you're not playing the level 0 version of this one, I don't know how often you're going to need to either upgrade to the level 2 or level 4 version.
I do think there are builds where you could use your arcane slots solely for combat, and you bring up Jacqueline, the level 4 upgrade. I do think that there's a build of Jacqueline where you play all the combat spells that you can take, and you can kind of rely on your 3 intellect and a flashlight to get a lot of your investigating done. So I do think there are uses for it. You know, I know you guys are a bit down on this card, but I tend to like it.
Yeah, I got. Oh, I totally understand. The whole what's it also Jenny Barnes with combining Hard Knocks and Arcane Studies is it's a classic combination right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's definitely not a card you play to overbuild around, but I have found it to be a pretty useful role filler in a lot of decks.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a, you know, as far as pure mystics go, this one probably isn't one of your first choices, but if you're looking at off-class mystics, certainly the ability to boost willpower and intellect can be quite valuable, especially if you don't specialize in either of those skills out of the box. That's going to do it for our look at the first 5 cards in the Mystic card pool. Mystics get off to, I guess, a decent start. We had Holy Rosary and Shriveling, both of which getting Elder Signs, and then Forbidden Knowledge, of course, being primarily an Agnes card. Scrying, probably shouldn't be playing that, and then Arcane Studies is something that you may want or may not want, depending on what kind of build you're going for. I guess in the revised core, it can be helpful in either investigator, and then you'll have to pick and choose going forward. Any final thoughts?
This has got some staples in here with Holy Rosary and Shriveling.
Yeah, we need more Shrivelings, please.
We need a level 1 Shriveling, a level 4 Shriveling, a level 3 Shriveling, a level 2 Shriveling, and a level 5 Shriveling.
And an
you know what?
exceptional
Then a level,
Shriveling.
Yes, we need an exceptional level 4 Shriveling, so an 8 XP Shriveling. Yeah.
You forgot about a permanent Shriveling.
Ah, dang it. We need one of those too.
A permanent
That would
Shriveling.
be broken. That would be so broken.
MJ, if you're listening, let Jeremy design it.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.